And all right. My name is Jessica Wise. I'm a graduate assistant for the Reinberger Children's Library Center at Kent State, where I'm a graduate student in the MLIS program. And I'm joined here by author Ann Suk Wang. Would you care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun for me. Let's see. A little bit about me. I have two boys. One just graduated from college, and another one is headed to college. He is a senior in high school, and I live in California, and it's warm, and I'm still wearing a sweater because I get cold. But uh, yeah, I was a journalist. I love writing. I've loved writing since I was young. And fun things. I like to roller skate and oops, sorry about that. Okay. And dance and sing and all sorts of things.
So awesome. I like to sing too, so we've got that in common. Um, I've got some questions here prepared. So I guess kind of my first one is I'm always interested in knowing this with authors, but then I also think it's important for the writing process. So what was your favorite book growing up, and how did that kind of influence your decision to to read and write, but then also, like this is like it shapes who I am as a writer as well.
Yeah, I liked so many books for different reasons. When I was in fourth grade, I remember my teacher, Mrs. McLaughlin, reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe out loud. And it was the part I loved every day. I just look forward to that read aloud time. And even though I could read in fourth grade, it was just so fun to hear my teacher read that and just getting through a whole book, reading it aloud. My mom didn't read to me too much, only because I think it was a language thing and she didn't feel as comfortable. But when somebody read aloud to me, that was a lot of fun. And in college, I loved the Lorax. I took an environmental studies class. And before the movie ever came out, this was way back when, and and the professor just set up the whole class by reading the Lorax. And I was reminded how much I loved it, but also just on my own in elementary school, I love things like um, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, really old title, and so many different picture books. I just lived in the library, loved just voraciously going through all the books I could get my hands on. So I don't think I've ever stopped collecting children's books. When I had kids, it was just an excuse to buy more. But it was definitely something I've held on to for all my life and still collect those books. But all those stories, just I love the hope in stories. So I like happy endings. Even if something is really difficult, I want there to be hope and something I can look forward to. And I think that's something I always want to portray in my stories. Sometimes I'm in a humor mood, and so I just like funny stories, and sometimes ones that make me cry, just all the stories. Love
Mhm.
them. Um, but those are some of my favorite ones.
Well, and I love that you said, you even collect them now. I think there's this idea that, oh, picture books are just for children. But I mean, when I first read The House Before Falling into the Sea, I'm like, I need every adult ever to read this book. And I put it in my interview that I thought was so interesting how you were able, like, it feels like a child could read this and empathize, but also that message for adults of like, this is the reality. Like, it's just, picture books are not just for kids. Um,
Absolutely not. There's many layers in picture books. Kind
mhm,
of some movies, the kids get one level of it, and then as you grow older or mature, you
mhm.
see all the many different layers. And That's the magic of these beautiful, and picture books, especially because they're so beautiful
Hmm.
visually as well, not only for your eyes, but hopefully for your ears as well. And yeah, so I agree with you. Love picture books for all ages.
So I know in the back matter of The House Before Falling into the Sea, it talked about how a lot of this was influenced by some of your family. But what kind of like inspired you to write this book? And I guess, again, going back to like this is a heavy, important topic, and you use the medium of a picture book, like what made you decide, yes, like this needs to be done in a picture book? Because I mean, I would have read it any way you wrote it, but I think in a picture book, I think it was so much more impactful. So what kind of, motivated you, inspired you to write this book, and then also to choose a picture book for this topic?
Well, it started as a middle grade, actually, but a lot of writers like to play with the different formats. And so when I did try to put it in a picture book format, I think it went through many iterations because uh, and this kind of ties into why I wrote it. But there's so many different tellings of this story, so many different details
Hmm.
that I thought only a middle grade could really tell all of it. But but I took out just different parts of the story that I thought were the most important and most relevant, and it worked in a picture book. And even though I tried it many different ways, it finally sat in a space where it sang to me, like it just worked, and
Hmm.
it followed just a really satisfying storytelling uh, format. So
Hmm.
I I decided to try the picture book, and one day I would love to go back and do this in a middle grade version as well. But even though I've been hearing all these stories all my life about my mom when she was 7 and all of the different people who came through the house, it wasn't until my dad passed away about 10 years ago, in 2014. Wow, it's a long time ago. And so when he passed away, I remember my mom saying, "Oh, they used to live with us in Korea during the war. They had come to pay their respects to my father." And even though my mom was 7, they continued to honor my family. They leave flowers at my grandma's grave site. And so there are people, families who moved to California. And I remember hearing about this and thinking, okay, I have to commit this story to paper and put it down on um, something, at least write it for myself.
Hmm.
Remember all the stories that my mom would say in particular about the Korean War and when she lived in Busan. And, I just encourage when I do school visits or bookstore signings that everybody has these stories in their lives. And it's just a matter of writing it down for yourself. And then if you're a storyteller, there's so many different ways to tell that story.
Hmm.
It's in a book or in a movie or in a song. Um, play, just it's endless, right? All the different ways you can tell your story, or if for no other reason, just for yourself and for your family's records.
Hmm.
I think it's important to talk with different generations. And this story, even though I didn't write it as a generational story, somebody pointed out, oh, I use this in my um with older kids in college, uh and to teach them about intergenerational storytelling. And it's really hard to tell stories when they come from a place of pain. So
Hmm.
this kind of eases people in, even very, like elderly people in their 80s, it even helps them to be able to tell their stories.
Hmm.
So going back to, picture books only for kids. Um, but yeah, it's for the relationship, because picture books are read to children usually, whereas leveled readers are kids reading to
Hmm.
themselves. So the picture book is that very relational place where adults interact with their children and have that moment of
Hmm.
read. So, I don't know where I was going with all that, but yeah, it's for all those reasons I love picture books, but also, yeah, that's how the story came
Hmm.
about. It's family stories.
Yeah. And I think something else, like I was on the 2025 Scott Odell Award committee, and I noticed that a lot of the books that were published last year that we were looking at were telling stories that of American history, but that we don't often get a point of view for. And I think that's one of the things that I loved is that this made the Korean War in Korea, I feel like it made it more approachable for American audiences because in school we're only really taught about Korean War from an American's point of view. But this, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this, I can really connect with this. There's something about this young female protagonist, like I'm able to connect with her really well. So I really appreciated that. I'm like, okay, this is something I just never thought of because of my own, personal historical education that I never really got in the other side. And I think the picture book format made that so much easier for me too. So I really appreciated that.
Oh, thank you. And I say this is a story about the Korean War, but it's also a story that we're all reliving over
Mhm.
and over in one way or another. And so, right now in LA, as we are um, trying to recover from the fires. There's somebody who lives in our home who lost their home. And so this idea of housing people and even people who are losing their own homes and have to cram into their relatives' homes, wherever they are in
Mhm.
this country. Um, it's unfortunately kind of an ongoing topic that people can relate to, even though they weren't in the Korean War,
Mhm.
which, by the way, is called the Forgotten War because of, for various reasons.
Mhm.
There are very big and important wars that kind of are on two ends of it, and so the Korean War gets forgotten about often. And um, but yeah, there's still wars all around the world,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and people have to remember that humans are involved and
Mhm.
we all need to be kind to each other and love each other and help in the big and little ways that we
Mhm.
can. So it's unfortunate, but I think it's still relevant in so many different ways. Different.
Absolutely. I agree. So I'm curious, your family's experiences was definitely a big influence and a factor in your research process, but what kind of was your research process for really the whole book, like further into your grandparents' experiences, but then also just the history of that area and what was going on there?
Yeah, I did a lot of research because I wanted to get the facts right. You know how family stories can turn into these fairy tales sometimes, things that just kept getting passed on, and I didn't want to pass on the wrong things, but it is their perspective, what happened during that time, especially my mom at 7. And, of course, memories get adjusted over time, but I wanted to get the big idea in that people did live there and that these things did happen in Busan and the place and the house itself, and even things like um, did the locks slide?
Hmm.
She didn't remember, but I had to research things. Did houses in that time, did the locks slide or how did they lock? There were lots of little details like that that you read over and don't think twice about.
I would have
Um,
never thought that you would have had to research that.
yeah, I just wanted every word to be accurate of
Mhm.
that time frame. So there was a lot of research done, and I had pages and pages of reading about the Korean War, when it exactly started and stopped, and why, and all of these things. Even though they're not in the book, they inform the book.
Mhm.
And even what the houses look like at that time, I put in the stones because my dad loves collecting these stones. But did houses have them?
Mm,
was it a thing then? That type of thing. I had to research also. And um, um, gosh, how many other things? Gosh, so many things. Oh yeah, the jjigae on their backs.
mhm,
That was also something my mom didn't tell me, but I knew that people came and traveled with these big backpacks with wooden frames that sometimes carried people and sometimes carried, you know, live chickens or whatever they were carrying, and all their stuff. So I had to do research about that. And so, yeah, there was a lot of research. And I know that the illustrator, Hanna Cha, also, I think she had like over 500 photos or 1,000. I don't know. It was a lot. And
mhm,
shows pictures of her research also to get the images just right, from what Busan looked like to what the houses look like, um, and the clothing. And so every time I hear her talk, I also think, oh, wow, I didn't know that, like that she put that into the
mhm,
story. Um, so yeah, there's always a lot of research,
mhm,
even it is just a family story or something from your
mhm,
own that you're making up. You want it to have the feel of reality and you want to make sure that it makes sense.
mhm.
Um so I think there's always research involved. And I
Yeah.
love research with a journalism background. You know,
I like research too, so
sometimes I do too much research and then I'm like, okay, I gotta write now. Because it's so interesting. You go down those little
yeah.
rabbit holes. But yeah, there were things about, I researched about the military people who came through.
Mhm,
And my mom would tell me they would throw Tootsie Rolls or they would throw candy. And then I would do my research and find out they were Tootsie Rolls and
mhm,
things like that. So many different things like that. But they did not make it into the book.
mhm. It
But
could have been a much longer book, probably.
like I said, middle grade novel. So maybe one day. But for now, sometimes too much information is just too much information. So
Mhm.
just put it
Uh,
in the
So you mentioned Hannah, the illustrator, and I know that typically with picture books, the illustrator will get your words and go from there. But I'm just curious if this process was different because I've been reviewing a lot for the Reinberger, and I mean, other books as well, but this book I really felt that, like what the words were saying and what the pictures were showing, they felt so cohesive that when I went back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that this was a different author and a different illustrator. They weren't the same person. So I guess, what was that process, and how were you guys able to create such a cohesiveness between the content of the book and then the illustrations?
well, a lot of times they don't let the author speak into what the illustrator does. It's half their book, half my book. But because I wanted to keep the art authentic, I did look at Korean American illustrators and of course their style and things like that, but I thought that would add to their understanding. And so believe it or not, Hannah and I did not talk at all until it was over, until her paintings were done. But she did ask a few things before she started, which was a photo of my mom during the time, and because she wanted to make her look a little bit like her in the book. Um, but everything else, she really felt she had a grasp
Mhm,
of what Busan was like, what the war was like. That's all very, similar across the board. What houses look like. She even asked for a photo of the house, but my grandmother, it's very strange, but she burned a lot of photos.
mhm,
So we didn't have a photo of the actual house, but my mom tried to describe it in the best way possible. And then Hannah took that and then matched it with other houses at the time in that area and did her best. And yeah, it was beautiful. Often authors are surprised at the end, pleasantly surprised because the illustration has so much more um, depth and than what we imagined. I could tell her what to do, but I believe what she did was even better than what I could have told her. She added things in there that I didn't even imagine, like the flowers at the
Hmm.
end that mean hope and perseverance. And it is a national flower of Korea. It's like a pink hibiscus. Um and I never thought to put that in, but she put that in, and she thought to put the Busan from 1950 on the front end pages, and then the current day
Hmm.
Busan, or it's not even current. I think it's already 5 to 10 years old. But
Hmm.
and Korea changes a lot in 10 years. So um she put a more modern day version of Busan on the back end pages. So that's all her. I did not tell her to do that. And it really is amazing that you know that she was able to take my words, and she studied my words.
Hmm.
So she really, and she won't accept the project unless she feels she has a vision for it.
Hmm.
So, so I was just hoping and praying that she would accept it, because because I loved her artwork, just
Hmm.
period.
I it felt simultaneously like yes, this feels like a picture book. It could be a book that kids read, but then it felt very, and again, I'm no art historian. I am not an expert on Korean history or art, but it felt like from what I've seen at museums, it felt like, oh, this looks like Korean art. Like I just think it was they
Mm,
were beautiful. And again, paired with your words, it just felt so cohesive and wonderful. So to hear that you guys really didn't talk at all, it just it's amazing what the
yeah.
product was.
Yeah, I do really think that her having that background in Korea, because she grew up there a little bit and studied there even, that also, fed into how she was able to bring it out. And you're right, it does look very Asian, even Korean, I guess. Um, and yeah, I was amazed how she did that.
Mhm.
But yeah, she did a great job.
Um, this book could have been, oh, I'm getting some echo. So this book could have been way longer. But is there one specific part that you really wish that you could have expanded upon more? And you were just kind of limited by, it's a picture book. I can't write a 75-page picture book, a 100-page picture book. So what was like that one thing, like if I could have expanded on this, this would be it.
That's such a good question. I've never had that asked of me. And um, yeah, I think the thing that comes up a lot in my head is the military and their presence around Busan. Um, I didn't want to make it about the fighting itself or the struggle back and forth. I mean, there is that with the sirens and going underground, but it's very like removed from it. I I wanted to show how human the soldiers were also. Um, and I wished I could do that a little bit more, because I know that that's a very strong connection to America, is how much America helped Korea
Mhm.
and how much Korea was appreciative of the help, that because of that they were able to get back on their feet. And I did want to show their humanity, and how they threw candy at the kids, and how they did things like that. But I think in the end it was good not to, because there's so many different feelings about the military, good and bad, challenging, some not so great. It gets too muddled.
Mhm.
So it became something that I just kind of put in the background.
Mhm.
Uh, but I would like to maybe one day in a middle grade address that a little bit, um, because it was real. They were around the area, and I don't want to not include them, but it was a reason why my mom thought so well of American people.
Mhm.
Um, she just thought that they were very kind, and for the most part. I
Mhm.
know that they're not that way everywhere all the time. But from what she saw, um, they gave out food and fun things for the kids and things like that. And she appreciated it. And when they called for medical help in America years later, my mom said, "Yes, I'll help." And
Mhm.
she came to America for that reason because they didn't have enough nurses in the hospitals, and she thought this was a good time to give back.
Mhm.
So I don't know, maybe I would have put something a little bit more in there about that. And I don't know, that's another topic that just thinking about it and how to tell it would take a while for me. But yeah, I just put that aside for the picture book.
Yeah. And with heavy topics like this, like I said, you were simultaneously able to give it a gentleness that kids can resonate, but also the frankness with this is the reality of things. And I think for things like that, but then also with the family that, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an author, but you had to have this level almost of, I need to respect and represent their struggles fully, or as much as I can within the medium I have, um, while also not to like. I would love to read about the soldiers and just that perception. I think it just creates a more well-rounded story, creates more rounded history. But I don't know, like was that difficult for you to feel like you gave Kyung? Am I pronouncing her name right? To give Kyung and her family, like, I'm representing her struggles, the struggles of the refugees. I'm respecting it, while at the same time, this is also my family's story that I'm, respecting that as well. So, I like, was that a difficult process? How long did it take?
Yeah, it was difficult. You can go through so many different, you can take so many different angles. And yeah, you just reminded me there were also stories about people who stayed there that I didn't include. There's just too many stories.
Mhm.
I try to pick out the ones that stood out in my mom's mind as a 7-year old. Like the candy maker's daughter,
Mhm.
actually koguma, or like the sweet potato maker's daughter. Like
Yeah.
they like to sell that on the streets and things like that. Like a lemonade stand here.
Mhm.
Like kids would do that. And so yeah, there were lots of stories like that. But uh yeah, it was challenging to figure out what to leave in, what to take out. But I'm sorry, ask me one more time really quick. I lost my train of thought.
Oh no, I did it too. Just, what was that process for feeling like you gave not just Kyung, because that's coming from a very, it's your family, but also the stories of these refugees and their struggles well. Like, what was the process, or how long did it take you to feel like, I know my family, I don't know these refugees, but I feel like I have represented their struggles and what they went through well.
Yeah, that was part of the research, just looking at what it was like from the perspective of those who were fleeing
Mhm.
danger. And ironically, and you read about this in the back of the book, in the back matter, but Hannah's family she's from her ancestors were the ones who were fleeing and all made it down to Busan and stayed there during the war to stay safe. And so I knew a lot about the people fleeing also because my mom's brother was far away at the time. They had big families, and my mom was one of the younger ones, and her brother was old enough to be in the war. And so he helped out with the military, but also he has lots of stories about people they helped,
Mhm.
and um and people they ran into. And um yeah, I think the universal story of feeling displaced um was the thing I wanted to touch upon because uh everybody um, feels like they want to stay home, wherever that is. But when you're forced to move away,
Mhm.
uh, that is jarring to say the least, but just a really unimaginable thing to do, to just have to leave all of a sudden your home and all that you knew behind. And whether it's in Korea or anywhere else, I try to understand what that could have felt like, and just insert it, insert it a little bit so
Hmm.
that um, people could see both receiving and also those who had to leave. And
Hmm.
um, yeah, and for a kid, all they see is this is stressful, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things happening here, and I'm not used to this. And so I try to do that because kids go through lots of stresses, and when they have to move and they don't have a say in it because their parents made them go, you
Hmm.
know, kind of version of um, your whole world being
Hmm.
rocked, having to deal with that stress. And um, so yeah, it was all a part of um trying in a very simplistic way, but just touching on those different issues so that they could be points that whoever reads it, there will be different things that stick out to them.
Hmm.
May be able to say, hey, I can relate to that, or I can
Yeah.
relate to their point. And yeah, so I try to put a little bit of those points in here and there as much as possible without
Hmm.
making it feel too heavy,
Hmm.
too much like I'm trying, to
Yeah.
shove it in. It's kind of natural, the progression of that time,
Yeah.
and but also make it so that it's palatable for
Hmm.
a kid.
Yeah. And I mean, I read it multiple times as I was writing my review, and each time I focused on something different. And I was like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time, or oh, I have a little bit deeper with that. So I loved it so much. So as we're coming kind of to the end of our time, thank you again. But you mentioned the back matter, which I loved the back matter. I loved the extra information it gave us, and I think that it's great not just for kids to have this context, but for all readers. Again, picture books are not just for kids. So I guess what is, there's so many little things you try to put in, like you said, but what is kind of this main, if you had one thing that you wanted readers to take away when reading the back matter, but really the whole book, what is this one thing that you want them to take away? And this can be for kids, for adults, for all readers, however you interpret that.
Yeah, that's really hard. I think something that I kept pointing back to: when you write, you try to remember what the heart of your story is. And the heart of this story was loving your neighbor, was showing kindness, and um, and maybe if there was a third one, like hope in hard times,
Hmm.
whatever those hard times are. But um, loving your neighbor is a theme that anybody can relate to.
Hmm.
It's hard to love somebody who is outside of what you're used to. So sometimes your neighbor is physically your next door neighbor, but it can also be somebody across town, across country. Those can be, like neighborly, states are neighboring
Hmm.
states and countries are neighboring countries.
Hmm.
Um, and if you align politically, you're also a type of neighbor. You're understanding each other and you want the same things
Hmm.
politically. So that's why we help each other. We help each other for many different reasons, not just because it helps me to help you, but and it just helps you or whatever, but it is good for all of us. So that help from a neighbor and for a neighbor is something I really wanted to emphasize, because it is, and at the end, how that was something good for Kyung also. It
Hmm.
was just good for the people who stayed at her home, but she now has different relationships and different ways of looking at things. And it was hard, but it was worth it, kind of a feeling that helping is never easy. It's always sacrificial. But in the end, good things can and often do come out of that. And I wanted people to remember that that is true today as it was in 1950, as it will always be. So, so I hope at least people get that part. Yeah.
So, well, thank you so, so much. Like I said, I loved this book. It was wonderful. Anyone who watches this interview, please go read The House Before Falling into the Sea. It was wonderful. And again, thank you so much for being willing to do this. So, any last words? We have about a minute left before I get kicked off the Zoom.
Great. Yeah, it's um no, I just wanted to say thank you for doing this and for your interest and for writing about it. And yeah, I really appreciate you doing that. And this book is now in video format, it's in audiobook format, it's in so many different formats. It's fairly easy to get. So yeah, I do hope people will read it and read it for more than just Korean war history, but
Yeah.
for so many other things too. So,
So,
but thank you for
thank
listening. And
you.
yeah.
Thank you.